But back yet again, though, to Sovereign Marble, the launchpad of that dismal tangent. Besides its close and convenient proximity to these disturbing things, just a few short, several hundred yards away from the berm's broad, westernmost stretch of rampart, and besides therein implied its possible accomplice unto abomination, the blatant racism that I experienced at Sovereign Marble during the month that I worked there, and which led to my quick termination, that was merely territorial, like at the D.C., sterile, impersonal, the protection of turf. Only Sovereign Marble was economic turf instead of sexual. My supervisor, a short, portly Latin chud, for my very first day was looking for any infraction and just waiting for his first cause to get rid of me. And when he didn't find one within a month, he fabricated one and fired me for it. But believe me, how little I cared. Notwithstanding, and all told, though, just those things, some stares, glares, little cares, loose ties, weird surmise, whatever my month at Sovereign Marble implies between this racial compromise. These faceless little things did so comprise virtually all of my history with Hispanics, prior to this my present sojourn within this Kendall County fox den, wherefore I had little to analyze or despise. Oh, right, and Snovar, the snow removal company with which I was temporarily employed during the winter that my felony charge was still pending, and which seasonal position provided the contextual backdrop of that same night, vaguely referenced not long ago, in which by snow I was bound, and the looming cold of which, cold precipitate, still instills within me chills. But Snovar always resonated as a different villain, and I never associated that experience with any racism. But even any amicability pertaining to the characters among Snovar's cast, consisting entirely of Hispanics, except for the plot's only explicit conspirator, even those should be now tainted and valid, for that they all smell in my mind of the same treacherous scheme. For what it's worth, though, while the instances of our interactions were ultimately sparse, for as much as the guy that procured for me the temporary position, the father of a childhood classmate, a lifelong acquaintance, he and I worked on our own team, and like the other pairs of seasonal employees, mostly independent from the other pairs of Snovar's snow removal professionals. Yet during the few occasions that we did associate, a large group assembled together to work a large site, or a congested public plaza during a snowstorm, or under some similar pretense, I found all those Latins to be only friendly, forthcoming with offerings of food de almuerza, and invitations to partake therein, polite, sociable, maintaining light conversation through a few storms over shifts of many several hours, nor to me were they ever once hostile, or anything but hospitable. Actually, despite the terror of Snovar's cold climax, their brief acquaintances supplied my whole personal impression of Hispanics, truth be told, which lasted for years and which was only positive. I respected their hearty hard work and their proud workmanship in our every shared work environment. And I long admired a pride for their religious cultural roots, which I had perceived as principal to their people. And so things haven't always been like this. In fact, there was such a time that the small words of a humble Latina civil employee conveyed to me the most reassuring and validating encouragement that I had ever yet received, and which may yet still have been. It was my second meeting with my second probation officer, many years ago by now. Once a month, during the duration of my original 2-year probationary sentence, I was to report for a meeting with an assigned probation officer. With a year still left to go, my original probation officer had been promoted, and this was the second meeting with her replacement. The meetings were held each month within a little office, within the little police station of Sandwich, Illinois. They never ran very long, 10, 15 minutes tops usually, less. A greeting, a quick chat, discussing plans that I would probably never pursue, or enduring the due diligence of an investigative lecture, and soon departure. The county certainly had harder cases under its supervision, and my first probation officer had treated me thusly. One enters the little station immediately into a little lobby, on the far end of which is the little office. Prior to every meeting, as one waits in the little lobby, a short questionnaire was to be filled out, verifying various details pertinent to present circumstance. Sitting in the little lobby, jotting down the same details that I had the month before, I could hear two voices in the little office that morning. Just a couple short minutes, and after I had finished filling out the form, my new probation officer stepped out into the little lobby and, passing through, directed me to have a seat in the little office where she would join me shortly. She was sitting behind the desk and smiled upon my entry, inviting me to take a seat across from her in the chair in which my new probation officer must have just prior been sitting. Her smile was warm and bright, happy and sincere. She was to be a conducting partner in that month's meeting. My first probation officer's promotion had left a void in the department, which vacancy was to be filled by the sweet, motherly yet young Latina. Whose smile had so warmly greeted me, and who was currently being trained by the woman, my new probation officer, in whose seat the young Latina currently sat. She didn't wait for her partner to return to start the interview. She introduced herself and explained her involvement in that month's meeting, before adopting her more official demeanor and proceeding down the questionnaire checklist. Are you still at such and such address? I was. Are you currently employed? I was not. Have you had any police contact since your last meeting? I had not. Have you consumed any alcohol since your last meeting? I had not. Have you used any illegal drugs since your last meeting? I lied. She moved on. Have you been in contact with any other felons since your last meeting? Not to my knowledge. With my answer to her last question, she acknowledged with her grin, I think, the absurdity of the inquiry, as though one were to ask each new trivial daily exchange if they too were drug felons. And after no time at all, the formalities were out of the way, and she too suddenly less institutional and more conversational. She asked me what my plans were, what efforts I've put forth in finding a job, and other such things about future and outlook. Not in such a way as to nag, but more to gauge my response. She could tell that I was going through the motions. So what do you do all day then? Not being judgmental, but inquisitive. Without incriminating myself, I gave an almost honest assessment of my day-to-day routine. How I would wake up, shower, and walk my dogs, then immediately get to work, studying and writing, for the next many, many, many hours. Which was another lie, as I wasn't writing at the time, and hadn't been already for years. What do you study? The Bible. Is that what you write about? Not quite, but I went on to explain. Few times in my life have I felt so personally, so intimately befriended from up on high, as she would then make me to feel. Not in any divine sense, but by an initiative. Faceless and nameless to me, and kindless and more divine than myself, with a latitude like eagle from up on high, to look down and discern a mouse on the ground, and the lightness of feather touch, to whisper, as it were, encouragement through lofty channels, but unto her happy embassage before me, for humble's behalf. Even already by that time, everyone had long seemed quieted by the same hushed reserve, directly respondent to my wherewithal, an amplified volume to the nervous noise of silence by background sound now louder, a peripheral vigilance to the unanimous context within my every public place, careful exchanges, frigid faces, and the rigidity of roles never rehearsed, yet now assumed by amateur actors, howbeit all reciprocate to my as yet unremarkable person, to outward appearance, an objective view, that is, for I had not yet decided to be beautiful, as you could too, if you already haven't or haven't need to, and the hardest measure accomplished and the toughest barrier overcome. And as how goes, who knows, or the name behind unpublished prose. Even so, in my hand I might harbor tremendous talent, yet how little should avail for so hardly put to motion. And what but the clock keeps pace to our dances alone? Already by then, there had seemed an omniscient observance too much about and always around me, as though there were perpetual awareness to my protagonists within proximity, and each place like pages of plot, and people like punctuation perusing my passing paragraph, supplying position to subject and sentence, and structure to separate semantics, yet contributing no linguistic to composition, or sound, but sight to expression. Even by then, as though privy, like all were aware of something about or around me which I wasn't, and still am not. But in her, the young Latina trainee at the probation meeting that day, I found some small semblance of comfort, that something like vouched for vindication. I was concluding my clarification of my independent academic pursuits, prophecy and prose, paraphrasing of course, when she finished my rambling, wandering thought, how that I was entirely, just taking notes, but how that said studying is in preparation for the real writing later, whenever it might resume, and I should take up my life again. And as I was still too much in the midst of the story to narrate it, and as the meager wages that I was earning driving my brother to his job were sufficient unto my meek survival living in my parents' house, while utterly neglecting to mention, of course, the real reason for my unemployment, the acute workplace phobia which I had acquired just a year and some few months prior to the day in the probation office, while on that night, bound by snow, I became traumatized of male co-workers and their conspiracies, and disdainful for many years hence to seek for real employment. Howbeit, though, so I've devoted this time to non-stop study, but always diligently at work throughout the day, which was true, but not by half. I just don't get paid for it. She was nodding along. I know it sounds strange, but I'm just walking on the water, finishing my thought with her own. She nodded her head in approval as she spoke, looking not at me, but into me, with an authority like Martha in her sincerity. And wheresoever this indictment shall be weighed throughout the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of as memorial unto her, and evidence against my mangled witness, and testament to such magnanimous humanity that pulses too through Latina's heart. I remember that my eyes lit as I confirmed her sentiment, a trust in the protective power of the Spirit, which faith we shared, expressed by her interjection. Her words were like a wink of encouragement from a long-sought collective, a thumbs up from an unseen hand. She had done unto me a good work, and I would never forget it. At least I imagined at the time that I would not. In perfect timing, my probation officer stepped unto, then under the threshold, and into the little office. She didn't even sit. Her protege acknowledged everything with me was going well, and my next monthly meeting was quickly scheduled before I was sent on my way. Nothing had changed. I was still wadding thick through the muck, and would awake again the next day despondent. Yet I had left more assured of my own blind sight, as I should but continue to struggle through. That was now many years gone by. I thought of her, the motherly Latina from the probation office, not too long ago, for the first time in a long time, and I was ashamed. It would physically pain me. It would cause my stomach to violently turn, and I wouldn't be able to meet her eyes should I ever see her again. For her to have heard any of the verbally vicious vitriol spewed in violent vituperation about, toward, and against the male half of her Hispanic demographic, to which I have given voice in these past months, alone in my car, which I pay for with my money. But atrocious assaultive insults, rank and raunchy revilings, monologue imitations of creeps and perverts as musing on malicious Catholic motif, and spoken, with great linguistic parody and nuance, mind you, in the mocking character of a stereotypical Hispanic accent, which deplorable ranting ventilations, and the many rants that I've given vent to since then thereafter, within the memory of any that should have heard them, albeit their brilliant reference and wherefore, shall never be forgotten, and which also somehow validate, after the fact, their animosity against me, and the hostility that they've imposed, but preemptively, I guess, yet which too provoked the retaliation of my serrating sharp soliloquy.